Hello all. Today we will discuss about the development of the central nervous system. As we have studied in the general embryology, the central nervous system is derived from the surface ectoderm. Then, during the third week of intrauterine life, a very important process occurs, and this is called the neurulation. Neurulation is defined as the formation of the neural tube from the neural plate. So let's have a quick recap of what is the neural plate. After gastrulation has happened and all the three germ layers have formed, that is the ectoderm, mesoderm and the endoderm, then this is the picture that we have in the third week of intrauterine life. Now here you can see that this is the notochord and this is the mesoderm in front of the notochord, that is the precaudal mesoderm. These two structures, the notochord and the precaudal mesoderm, they induce the overlying ectodermal cells to thicken. These cells are present in the ectoderm, but now they are modified because of the induction to form a neural plate. So we had this slipper shaped embryo, and this is the dorsal view of the embryo, and so basically this would be the ectoderm entirely, and this portion of the ectoderm has been induced by the notochord and precaudal mesoderm, and the cells have become specialized. These cells form the neural plate, and these cells are called the neuroectoderm. This neural plate extends from the primitive node caudally to the buccopharyngeal membrane region rostrally. The neural plate is also almost slipper shaped, and this neural plate will get differentiated to form a neural tube, and this process is called neurulation. So let us see now how neurulation occurs. In the third week of intrauterine life, after the gastrulation has happened, this is the embryo. This is the yolk sac, this is the amniotic cavity, and the ectoderm, mesoderm, and the endoderm. So this would be the embryonic disc. Now, the neural plate that has formed as a result of the induction by notochord and precaudal mesoderm, the edges of this neural plate will now get elevated. When they get elevated on either side of the midline, they form an elevation which is called the neural fold. The midline depression between the neural folds becomes the neural groove. Now these neural folds, they will approach each other in the midline and they will fuse. The fusion of neural folds begins in the cervical region of the embryo, and then from here it proceeds cranially as well as caudally. And once the neural folds have fused throughout the length of the embryo, we get this cylindrical structure, which you can see here also. So this cylindrical structure will be the neural tube. This neural tube finally gets separated from the surface ectoderm and gets embedded in the mesoderm. And this neural tube is the precursor of the brain and the spinal cord in future. Let's have a look at this model that we have. So this is representing a section through the embryo, as you can see in this picture. So let's identify all the structures. This is the ectoderm, These are the neural folds that have developed as a result of elevation of the edges of the neural plate, and this depression here is the neural groove. While these neural folds are fusing with each other, a population of cells at the lateral border of neural plate, they get separated from this developing neural tube, and this population of cells is called the neural crest cells. I will discuss these cells later. Now below the developing neural tube, this is the notochord, and on either side of the developing neural tube here you can see the mesoderm that has differentiated into a paraxial mesoderm, which is differentiating to form the somites, the intermediate mesoderm, and a lateral plate mesoderm that has split into a somatopleuric component and a splanchnopluric component. And this here is the endoderm. Now, this is a dorsal view of the embryo, and this is showing how the neural fold fused in the cervical region, and then they will proceed cranially and caudally. And we also have a model resembling this picture. So let us identify all the structures in this model. This is a dorsal view of this model, and this is a lateral view. So in the lower part of the embryo, this is the yolk sac region, and here would be the amnion, and the amnion has been cut to expose the embryo. So when you see from the top, after cutting the amnion, so this is the cut edge of the amnion, this is the embryo, and this is the neural tube, and the neural folds are fusing here. The anterior end has still not fused, and this is the region of the anterior neuropore. This is the region of the posterior neuropore. Here the neural tube, the lumen of the neural tube, is still in communication with the amniotic fluid. So these are the neural folds, and on either side of the neural tube you can see the paraxial mesoderm that is differentiating and segmenting to form the somites. After complete fusion of the neural folds, this is the picture that we get, and this is the anterior neuropore, this is the posterior neuropore. They have not yet fused, and so the lumen of the neural tube will communicate with the amniotic fluid. The anterior neuropore finally closes at day 25, and the posterior neuropore closes at day 28. As I was talking about the neural crest cells, which are a special population of cells at the lateral edge of the neural plate, and they get separated from the neural tube, and they come to lie dorsolateral to the neural tube. These neural crest cells will migrate to several regions of the embryo, giving rise to various structures, and their adult derivatives are very important. So they give rise to the connective tissue and bones of the face and skull. All the ganglia, including the cranial nerve ganglia, the dorsal root ganglia, the sympathetic chain and the pre-aortic ganglia, and the parasympathetic ganglia of the GI tract. They also give rise to special population of cells like the C cells of thyroid gland, the odontoblasts, the cells of the adrenal medulla, Schwann cells, glial cells, melanocytes, smooth muscle cells of the blood vessels of face and forebrain, and they also give rise to the meninges in the region of forebrain and the dermis in the face and neck, and a very important derivative, the conotruncal septum of the heart. So these derivatives you should know. Now that the neural tube has formed, let us see how it develops into the spinal cord and the brain. Let's first discuss about the differentiation of neural tube into the spinal cord. The caudal portions of the neural tube will give rise to the spinal cord. So, this is a cut section through the neural tube, and the wall of the neural tube contains a pseudostratified epithelium, and the cells that are present here constitute the neuroepithelium. As these neuroepithelial cells proliferate, certain zones get demarcated. Let us see. Now, immediately adjacent to the lumen, this layer is the ependymal layer. Outer to it is the mantle layer, and the outermost layer is the marginal layer. The cells of the neuroepithelium proliferate rapidly and they accumulate in the region of the mantle zone, especially in the ventral part. So as you can see in this picture, in the ventral part the cells have accumulated. This becomes a basal plate and motor neurons will differentiate in the region of the basal plate. So whatever cells that have come from the neuroepithelium by division of the neuroepithelial cells, when they accumulate here, they will differentiate into the motor neurons. Similarly, in the dorsal regions, the cells that accumulate, they constitute the alar plate, and this alar plate, the cells here will differentiate into the sensory neurons. Now, this groove, this longitudinal groove that separates the alar plate and the basal plate is called the sulcus limitans. So, as a result of proliferation and migration of the neuroepithelial cells into the mantle zone, the lateral walls of this neural tube in the spinal cord region have become very thick, whereas the roof and the floor, they are very thin, and they are called the roof plate and the floor plate respectively. No neuroblasts are seen here. Usually the fibers that travel from one side to the other are present here. So this is how from the neuroepithelium the basal plate and alar plate have formed, and you can appreciate these two plates, the alar and basal plate, in this model also. So this is the larger basal plate containing the motor neurons, and this is the alar plate containing the sensory neurons. This is the sulcus limitans that is labeled here as number 5. This is the roof plate. This is the floor plate. This is the lumen of the neural tube, and outside this mantle zone, this portion is the marginal zone. This marginal zone will contain the axons of the neuronal cell bodies that will differentiate in the mantle zone. So the marginal zone has fibers. When these fibers or the axons get myelinated, they will give a whitish appearance, and therefore this marginal zone will get differentiated into the white matter of the spinal cord. In the thoracic and upper lumbar segments of the developing spinal cord, another group of neurons accumulate in between the basal plate and the alar plate, and these neurons constitute a bulging which becomes the intermediate horn of the spinal cord. You can appreciate the development of intermediate horn here in this model also. So this is how the ventral horn, dorsal horn, and the intermediate horn will develop. Intermediate horn developing only in the thoracic and upper lumbar segments. And you can see how the lumen of the neural tube will ultimately form the central canal of the spinal cord. Let us now discuss in detail about the histogenesis of this neuroepithelium. So I have already told you that this neuroepithelium is a pseudo-stratified epithelium, and this constitutes the thickness of the neural tube. Now these neuroepithelial cells, initially they have a transient dendrite, but when they migrate, when they proliferate and migrate into the mantle zone, these cells will lose the dendrite and they become apolar neuroblast. This apolar neuroblast will sprout two cytoplasmic processes later to become a bipolar neuroblast. Now, one of the processes of this bipolar neuroblast will elongate rapidly to develop into the axon, and the cytoplasmic process at the other end, it will get differentiated into the dendrites, and ultimately we will get a multipolar neuroblast which will differentiate later into an adult neuron, thereby losing its ability to divide any further. Now, once this neuroepithelial cells have divided and formed sufficient number of neurons, after this they give rise to another population of cells which are the supporting cells or the glial cells. The precursor of these is the glioblast. This glioblast will differentiate and migrate into the mantle and marginal layers of the developing spinal cord and differentiate into the astrocytes and the oligodendrocytes. You know that there is another type of glial cells in the central nervous system, that is the microglia, but they are derived from the mononuclear phagocytic system and not from the neuroepithelium. So, once the neuroepithelium has formed the supporting cells, after that, whatever cells are remaining in the lining adjacent to the lumen, these cells will differentiate into the ependyma and they will form the epithelium of the choroidal plexus, thereby secreting the cerebrospinal fluid. So this is how the neuroepithelial cells have differentiated into the neurons, the astrocytes and oligodendrocytes, and also into the ependymal cells. Let us now form the spinal nerve. So the neurons have migrated and developed the basal plate and alar plate containing motor neurons and sensory neurons respectively. Now, the neuronal cell bodies that are present in the basal plate, their axons will break through the marginal layer of the spinal cord and they will emerge on the ventral aspect of the developing spinal cord. They will then get organized to form the motor root of the spinal nerve. Now you remember the neural crest cells, and I had told you that all the ganglia are derived in the body from neural crest cells. So these neural crest cells will migrate towards the developing spinal cord regions throughout the length of the spinal cord, and they will get differentiated to form the dorsal root ganglia. These dorsal root ganglia, the cells present here will have a central process that will go into the dorsal horn of the developing spinal cord and establish connections with the sensory neurons in the alar plate. The peripheral process of the dorsal root ganglia cells, as you can see here, they will elongate to form the the dorsal root of the spinal nerve or the sensory root of the spinal nerve, which will then unite with the motor root to form the trunk of the spinal nerve. So this is how the spinal nerve has formed, but the axons are not yet myelinated. Then in the regions of the central nervous system, the oligodendrocytes will myelinate the axons, and you know that one oligodendrocyte can myelinate approximately 50 axons. And in the when the axons have come outside the spinal cord, these portions will get myelinated by the Schwann cells. And you know that Schwann cells were derived from the neural crest cells. Now this myelination begins in the 4th month of intrauterine life, but it continues slowly and will happen even in the 1st year after birth. So myelination takes a long time, and this is how the spinal nerve gets formed. Let us now see how the cranial parts of the neural tube get modified and differentiated to form the brain. In the region of the cranial parts of neural tube, 3 dilatations will appear. These dilatations in a cranial to caudal region are named as the prosencephalon, the mesencephalon, and the rhombencephalon. The prosencephalon is the prospective forebrain, the mesencephalon is the prospective midbrain, and the rhombencephalon is the prospective hindbrain. Later, the prosencephalon will get differentiated into 2 parts, the telencephalon and the diencephalon, from which you can see the optic vesicle protruding out. So this would be the region of the diencephalon, and this is the region of the telencephalon. The mesencephalon will form the midbrain, and the rhombencephalon also gets divided into 2 parts, a cranial metencephalon, which will form the pons and the cerebellum, and the caudal myelencephalon, which will form the medulla oblongata. The derivatives from the telencephalon would be the cerebrum, and the diencephalon will give rise to the optic vesicle and also the thalamus, hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. So these are the adult derivatives of the prosencephalon, mesencephalon, and rhombencephalon. Initially, these are arranged in a craniocaudal fashion, but as you can see, gradually number of foldings or flexures will develop. So in this model, which is showing the development of the cranial parts of the neural tube, we can appreciate that this is the prosencephalon, which will get divided into a telencephalon and a diencephalon later. It is followed caudally by the mesencephalon, which will form the midbrain, and further caudally is the rhombencephalon. Now you can appreciate a flexure that has developed between the rhombencephalon and the spinal cord portions of the neural tube, and this flexure between the rhombencephalon and spinal cord is called the cervical flexure. Another flexure that develops in the region of the midbrain is called the mesencephalic flexure, also called the cephalic flexure. It is concave ventrally, and here you can see the rhombencephalic isthmus, which is separating the mesencephalon from the rhombencephalon. Later, this entire rhombencephalon is divided by this pontine flexure, which is convex ventrally, and this pontine flexure has divided this rhombencephalon into a cranial metencephalon, which will form the pons and cerebellum, and a caudal myelencephalon, which will give rise to the medulla. So now you have understood the various parts of the cranial portions of neural tube and their adult derivatives and the various flexures that develop in this region of the neural tube. This is a later picture when further differentiation has happened, and you can see in this model, and you can correlate it with this picture, and you can appreciate that this is the region of the developing cerebrum, from the telencephalon. This is the region of diencephalon. Then this is the region of mesencephalon, which will form the midbrain, and this is the rhombencephalon. The number 5 that you see here is the pontine flexure. This pontine flexure has divided rhombencephalon into metencephalon and myelencephalon. Here would be the cervical flexure, beyond which would be the spinal cord. Coming to the derivatives of the myelencephalon, the myelencephalon will form the medulla. It is the lower part of the rhombencephalon, and initially the structure of the neural tube in this region is similar to what we had in the developing spinal cord region. So there is this basal plate, alar plate, and this is the neuroepithelium, which was proliferating and giving rise to neurons of these two plates. And then these two plates together forming the mantle layer, and the axons coming out to form the marginal layer. But now in the region of myelencephalon, something interesting happens. From here, the lateral walls will get everted and they will open up like the pages of a book. So this is what we have now. The lateral walls have everted. So this is now the basal plate and the alar plate. The basal plate will form the motor nuclei, and they will differentiate into the functional columns, which you have already studied in neuroanatomy: the somatic efferent, the special visceral efferent, and the general visceral efferent column. And you know that in the medulla there will be the nuclei of the hypoglossal nerve in the somatic efferent column, and so on. So you know which cranial nerve nuclei will differentiate in which region of the brainstem from the basal plate, and similarly for the alar plate. The alar plate differentiates into the sensory nuclei. Now you see this roof plate. The roof plate has got stretched because of the eversion of the walls of the myelencephalon, and this roof plate will now be formed only by a single layer of ependyma. It gets covered by pia mater, and together they will form the tela choroidea, and the choroid plexus will develop here. The cavity of the myelencephalon will give rise to the central canal of the lower part of medulla, and in the upper part it will form the lower part of the fourth ventricle. You remember that the lower part of the fourth ventricle is formed by the dorsal aspect of medulla. So this will come in that region. Coming to the derivatives of metencephalon, you know that metencephalon is the cranial part of the rhombencephalon, and from the alar plate cerebellum will develop, from the basal plate pons will develop, and the cavity of metencephalon will give rise to the upper part of the fourth ventricle. Now in the region of the basal plate, the marginal layer, you see this marginal layer, the marginal layer will get expanded to make a bridge for the nerve fibers connecting the cerebral cortex above with the cerebellum and the spinal cord below. So this region acts like a bridge, and that is why this portion of the brainstem is called pons. So this is what happens to the marginal layer of the basal plates. Now the basal plate itself will differentiate into the motor nuclei, and the somatic efferent, special visceral efferent, and general visceral efferent columns will develop, and the corresponding cranial nerves nuclei will differentiate here. And similarly in the alar plate, the sensory nuclei will develop corresponding to the pons. But the margins of the alar plate, as you see here, the margins of the alar plate in the region of metencephalon get expanded to form a rhombic lip. The rhombic lips of both the sides will then approach each other in the midline, and they will fuse to form a cerebellar plate from which the cerebellum will develop. So this is how the cerebellum will form from a cerebellum plate, and the rest of it is forming the pons. Now, one another thing, in the marginal layer, there are certain pontine nuclei, you remember from neuroanatomy. The pontine nuclei differentiate from the alar plate and they migrate here, and they are derived from the alar plate of both metencephalon and myelencephalon. Coming to the derivatives of mesencephalon. Now, again, the motor plate, the basal plate will form the motor nuclei, and they will differentiate into the corresponding cranial nerve nuclei that are found in the midbrain. Now, the marginal layer gets expanded to form the crus cerebri. Now, what happens to the alar plate? Alar plate, initially, they appear as two longitudinal elevations, and they are separated by a shallow midline depression over here. And then on the dorsal aspect here, a transverse groove will appear, and it will divide each of these elevations into a superior colliculus and inferior colliculus. So ultimately on both the sides there will be two colliculi, and these are derived from the alar plate region of the midbrain. Basal plate has formed these motor nuclei. So this is what was the mantle zone, and the marginal zone has expanded to form the crus cerebri. An interesting thing about the colliculi is that they have a laminar arrangement, and that is because neuroblasts migrate into these regions from the neuroepithelium in waves, and because of the migration in waves, the cells here are arranged in layers. Now, in short, about the adult derivatives of prosencephalon. So prosencephalon, that was the primary brain vesicle, differentiates into a telencephalon and diencephalon. Now in the region of telencephalon, there will be expansion to form the cerebrum, and the cavity in this region also gets expanded to contribute to formation of the lateral ventricle on either side. So the cavity here, cavity of the neural tube, will form the lateral ventricle, and they will be connected by the interventricular foramen of Monro, and the cerebrum will develop from the neural tube here. Also, the hippocampus and the olfactory lobes will develop here. Now, from the diencephalon, the optic vesicle will develop, and then the epithalamus, which will form the pineal gland, the thalamus, and the hypothalamus. So these are all the derivatives of diencephalon. So this is what happens to the prosencephalon. Coming to the clinical correlates, you have already studied about the neural tube defects. So if the neural tube closure does not happen properly, the defect that results is a neural tube defect. If the closure does not happen properly in the cranial region, it will lead to the disorder which is called anencephaly. In anencephaly, as you can see in this picture, there is no skull vault, and the brain is open and it's almost rudimentary tissue. And you can see in this model, this is a fetus where you can see the face has developed normally, but there is no brain and no volt, no cranial bones have developed, and there is no brain here. So this is anencephaly. It is one of the earliest diagnosed disorders in pregnancy. It can be easily diagnosed through a simple ultrasound. Now, if the closure of the neural tube does not happen in the caudal regions, the condition that results is called a spina bifida. In this disorder, basically the vertebral arches have split. You can see here that the canal that had to be formed for the passage of spinal cord, that canal has not formed. The vertebral arch is split, and the underlying neural tissue may or may not be involved. If it is a simple defect, the underlying neural tissue is not involved, only the vertebral arch is split. In that case, the defect is called spina bifida occulta. The overlying muscles and skin are also intact here, and most commonly a tuft of hair can be seen protruding at the site of the defect. That is the only surface manifestation. Now, if the underlying defect, the underlying neural tissue along with the meninges are also involved, then the disorder is called spina bifida cystica. These are more severe forms of spina bifida. Now, in spina bifida cystica, through the defect in the vertebral arch, if only the meninges are protruding out, then the disorder is called a meningocele. If the meninges and the underlying neural tissue are protruding out through the defect, then the disorder is called a myelomeningocele. And the worst form of spina bifida is rachis. In this disorder, the neural folds do not elevate and they remain flat, and there is a rudimentary neural tissue here. So these are the various types of spina bifida. You can see here the fetuses showing the various defects. So this is the back of the fetus, and you can see here the spina bifida, and you can see the neural tissue is all exposed to the surface because the overlying muscles and skin are also involved, so they are not present here, and this is spina bifida. Now let's come to this one first. I have talked to you about rachis. So if the neural tube closure is not happening properly in the region of brain as well as in the region of the spinal cord, then there is a completely open brain and spinal cord, and this disorder is called a craniorachis. And this you can see in this fetus. It almost completely resembles this diagram, and you can see that the brain and spinal cord are exposed to the surface. This is craniorachis, a very severe form of spina bifida. Now, sometimes the bones in the region of the skull do not ossify properly. This most commonly affects the occipital bone. So the squamous part of the occipital bone does not form, and the meninges and sometimes the neural tissue also bulge out along with them, and this disorder is called encephalocele. And you can see in this fetus that the squamous occipital bone did not develop, and the brain and the meninges have come out and formed this sac-like protrusion at the back of the head. This is encephalocele. In the spina bifida disorders, the diagnosis can be made by ultrasound, and one can also test for the maternal serum alpha-fetoprotein. You also know that the incidence of spina bifida can be reduced by consumption of folic acid. 3 months prior to planning a conception or a pregnancy, a female should start having folic acid daily and should continue throughout pregnancy. So you have to remember that, and you should remember the dosages as well. Coming to the other disorders related with the central nervous system, sometimes the head of the fetus is very small, the bones are very small, and this disorder is called microcephaly. This disorder can be genetic or it can be induced by certain teratogens which the pregnant female was exposed to during early fetal life. Another disorder is holoprosencephaly. Holoprosencephaly basically is a spectrum of anomalies characterized by loss of midline structures. So there can be a variety of combinations of malformations of the brain and the face. The most severe one is what you see here in this picture. So this is a normal fetus, and here is the most severe form of holoprosencephaly. Here the two lateral ventricles, they fuse, and the telencephalon has basically one single telencephalic vesicle instead of two separate lateral ventricles. The eyes are also fused, and there is one single nasal cavity, and this is a proboscis. The corpus callosum is also absent. There can be other varieties of holoprosencephaly where the two cerebral hemispheres have separated, but there are certain midline facial defects. As you can see here, the nose has not properly formed. Here you can see the middle part of the upper lip not formed, and there is cleft in the face. So these are various types of uh, anomalies that can be seen in holoprosencephaly. So this was about the important disorders that are associated with development of the central nervous system. Thank you.